So last time we started thinking about two types of reactions. We were thinking about oxidation reactions and reduction reactions. And we said that an oxidation reaction is where you lose electrons. So here, sodium has lost an electron. The reason there's a 2 there is because there's 2 sodium atoms. So each sodium atom has lost 1 electron, and each hydrogen atom has gained 1 electron, and reduction is gain. So today we're going to think about redox reactions, okay? And it shouldn't be any surprise that redox is reduction and oxidation. So when we talk about redox reactions, we're talking about reactions where reduction and oxidation both happen. Okay, so it's reduction, oxidation, redox. So if a reaction has both of these processes happening at the same time, then we can call it a redox reaction. Now, last time we talked about redox, so we talked about reduction, oxidation in terms of electrons. There are in fact 2 different ways to think about reduction and oxidation. Okay, so there are 2 ways we can think about it. And one of those ways is in terms of electrons. And that's exactly what we did last week. So if we're talking about reduction, oxidation happening in terms of electrons, we're thinking about oxidation is loss of electrons and reduction is gain of electrons. And that's how we get oil rig. Okay, so when we're talking about redox reactions in terms of electrons, we expect one species to lose electrons and one species to gain electrons. So if we were to go back to last week, so this would be an example of a redox reaction because my sodium is losing electrons and my H plus is gaining electrons. So they're both happening at the same time, so it's a redox reaction. We can also think about redox in terms of oxygen. Now this shouldn't really surprise you because it's called oxidation. If anything, you should have thought, well, what does oxidation have to do with electrons? But it is related. But for now, we can think of reduction, oxidation happening in terms of oxygen. So, unsurprisingly, oxidation is the gain of oxygen. And hopefully you don't need a special mnemonic to remember that, because the clue is in the name. Okay, so if oxidation is the gain of oxygen, then reduction is the loss of oxygen. All right, so those whenever we talk about reduction and oxidation, you can think of it in one of these 2 ways. Now, it doesn't mean that both of them will always be happening. Okay, it is possible to have oxidation without the gain of oxygen. It's possible for that to happen without the gain of oxygen, as long as there is loss of electrons. Okay, so in this example from last week, here, sodium, we're not necessarily gaining any oxygen here. Okay, it could be gaining a chloride ion or something like that. But we are losing electrons, so it can be called oxidation. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples of what this looks like. So if I write out an equation Okay, so if we look at this equation, we can see that I start here with aluminium and I end up with aluminium oxide. So I've gone from aluminium to aluminium oxide. All right, that has gained oxygen. So it is oxidation. And over here I've got iron oxide, which has gone to iron, so I've lost oxygen. So if I look over here, we have lost oxygen, which means we have reduction. Okay? Now, what we can do is, if we imagine this reaction happening where it's solid aluminium reacting with a solution of iron oxide and a solution of producing a solution of aluminium oxide and solid iron, we can now write out the ionic equation for this. Actually, this is the thermite reaction, so it's not, I'm wrong there. That's not aqueous, and that's not aqueous, and that's not solid. What this actually is this is solid iron oxide, solid aluminium oxide, and we end up with liquid iron. So this reaction is where we have solid aluminium and solid iron oxide gives us solid aluminium oxide, and it's so hot that the iron that gets produced is liquid iron. Okay, so now if we write out, we'll not write out an ionic equation, we'll write out half equations for what happens here. So I have two aluminiums, all right, and they go to produce two aluminium. Now aluminium is in group 3, so it's Al3+. Now, how does that happen? Well, I lose 6 electrons. Iron, there are 2 Fe's, and they form, that needs to be balanced, 2 Fe atoms. How do they do that? Well, they gain 6 electrons. So what we've got here is our aluminium is losing electrons. Okay, so this is the loss of electrons. And loss of electrons is oxidation. And here my iron is gaining electrons, which is reduction. So either way you look at it, the aluminium has gained oxygen, so it's oxidation, or the aluminium has lost electrons, so it is oxidation. On the other hand, iron has lost oxygen, so it's reduction, or it has gained electrons, so it is reduction. So there are these two ways of thinking about it, oxidation and reduction. And remember, if they're both happening at the same time, these are redox reactions. So here I've got reduction and oxidation in both cases, both ways of looking at it. So it is a redox reaction.